Sí, es que mire, por ejemplo, ahorita están...
Doctor Eisenberg es egresado de la Escuela de Medicina de la Universidad de Harvard con especialidad en Medicina Interna. Ha fungido como supervisor del Instituto Nacional de Salud, de la FDA y la Federación de Educación Médica enfocada en la investigación y políticas de la medicina complementaria alternativa e integradora. Trabajó en el Comité de la Academia Nacional de Ciencias, responsable del reporte el uso de la medicina complementaria y alternativa para la población estadounidense. Actualmente es miembro del comité
¿qué es lo que necesita por el tripié para su...
en lo que dan la plática?
Es director del programa de Educación Médica
ahorita que hable,
titulado Cocina Saludable, Modos de Vida Saludable para nuestros pacientes y nosotros mismos. Auspiciado por el Instituto Samuel, la Escuela de Salud Pública de Harvard y el Instituto Culinario de América. Este programa reúne especialistas en nutrición, médicos entrenadores, deportistas, asesores de salud y culinarios, considerando el medio ambiente que involucra a patologías como diabetes, obesidad y otras enfermedades relacionadas con el estilo de vida. El doctor David M. Eisenberg es vicepresidente ejecutivo de Educación e Investigación en Salud del Instituto Samuel. Es profesor adjunto y asociado de nutrición en la Escuela de Salud Pública de la Universidad de Harvard. Director fundador del Centro de Investigación OSHA, responsable y fundador de la División para la Investigación y Educación de Terapias Integrativas y Complementarias en la Escuela de Medicina de la Universidad de Harvard. El doctor David Eisenberg simultáneamente fungió como director del programa de Medicina Integrativa del Brigham and Women's Hospital. Su investigación educativa incluye estudios para valorar la seguridad, costo y efectividad clínica de las terapias médicas complementarias e integrativas, evaluación sistemática de la medicina herbal con uso formal de tecnología científica, estrategias multidisciplinares para optimizar el estilo de vida y los comportamientos de autocuidado, dieta, ejercicio y manejo de estrés, para la prevención y tratamiento de las condiciones médicas comunes. Actualmente su principal interés en investigación comprende la creación de estrategias nutricionales, mentales, ejercicio y comportamientos saludables. El día de hoy, el doctor nos presenta la ponencia Ven, prueba, haz y enseña, Educación Médica en la era de la diabetes y obesidad global. Estimados directores, docentes, expositores y asistentes al Cuarto Congreso Internacional de Educación Médica, con ustedes el doctor David M. Eisenberg. Doctor Eisenberg.
Buenos días. Thank you, Dr. Lopez. Thank you.
Es un placer estar aquí con ustedes.
No grabé nada de su currículum.
Pueden escucharme directamente en inglés, por favor. Si me escuchan directo en inglés, levanten la mano, eso me ayuda.
My topic today is about medical education in this era of global obesity. Let's begin with a famous quote by my colleague. She said, I have always felt that action was
Que la acción que más vale la pena observar no se ubica en el centro de las cosas, sino más bien donde los límites convergen, donde están estas cosas, estas fronteras, donde vemos estas flexiones y estas incongruencias en estos lugares, y aquí podemos ver lugares que mejor que si estuviéramos en el centro de cualquiera de estos.
Today I'd like to talk
Hoy
about
quiero hablarles
this interesting interface between medical education and the era
de la comunidad médica, la cual nosotros representamos profesionalmente en la comunidad alimenticia, que ambas son absolutamente esenciales para el cuidado de la salud y yo diría para la existencia humana.
I'd like to talk about food
Quiero
from a
hablarles
variety of
de la alimentación desde una variedad de puntos de vista. Obviamente cuando hablamos de la nutrición vemos que hay cosas que son más o menos sanas, pero también podemos hablar de que la nutrición nos puede ayudar a mejorar nuestros estilos de vida y nuestra salud. No nos olvidemos del placer, porque también el alimento es parte de disfrutar la vida y evitar esta sección. Sería como de comerlo. Después yo quiero poner esto dentro del contexto de la educación médica porque creo que hasta este punto nosotros hemos hecho un muy mal trabajo al pensar en la alimentación dentro del contexto de cómo vamos a tratar las siguientes generaciones. Entonces, para revisar los temas que estaré cubriendo en esta siguiente hora, después tendremos oportunidad de hacer una discusión abierta. Lo primero, quiero hablar aquí de las estadísticas que tienen que ver con la obesidad global.
We are, on a global basis, getting fatter and more diabetic.
Internacionalmente tenemos cada vez más obesidad y
I'd like to think about this from the
cada hora que pasa. Pero yo quiero hablar desde la perspectiva de los profesores de medicina, cómo estamos haciendo nosotros en la educación médica para atacar esta pandemia internacional, cómo estamos haciendo, cómo estamos funcionando nosotros como modelos a seguir frente a nuestros estudiantes y pacientes. Nosotros hemos observado estas tendencias en la sociedad, y estoy hablando desde los Estados Unidos, pero creo que muchas de estas tendencias son internacionales, corresponden a todo el mundo industrializado. Y lo más importante de lo que quiero hablarles es de la perspectiva para la siguiente generación. ¿Cómo vamos a cambiar nuestros programas curriculares para entonces poder cubrir estos desafíos que son tan extraordinarios? Y después de hablarles de los desafíos, quiero ofrecerles también algunas soluciones creativas. Quiero enfatizar que este aspecto de la educación médica es parcialmente didáctico, informacional y en gran grado experimental. Yo aprendí muchísimo de Norman en cuanto aprendemos y yo quiero reflexionar en esto en voz alta con ustedes. Quiero también traer a colación la idea de colocar cocinas de aprendizaje en los hospitales. Aunque parezca extraño, esto ya está sucediendo a lo largo de los Estados Unidos y quizás va a ser el siguiente paso para que entonces nosotros podamos entrenar a las siguientes generaciones. Y quiero tomar prestado de Ron Harden en su presentación de ayer cuando él nos hablaba de reestructurar fundamentalmente la educación médica. Quizás los hospitales y las escuelas de medicina deberían ser salones de exhibición de alimentos y nutrición sana. Y después quiero hablarles también de la tecnología, porque nuestros estudiantes están conectados, ellos están en internet casi 24 horas al día y hay dispositivos con los que nosotros como profesionales de la salud vamos a tener que incorporar a todas nuestras prácticas y también a nuestra educación. Y en la última sección hay darles un panorama de cómo debería ser después la educación médica y el liderazgo de la salud en 25 años, porque si podemos tener una visión de esto, podremos trabajar en relación a ello. Todos estos aspectos van a quedar dentro del contexto de que ustedes, como doctores médicos, van a querer incluir a cada una de sus instituciones.
It's customary in the United States to
En
get
los
the
Estados
audience
Unidos
to know
permiten que el
about
conflicto
the
que los
conflict.
escucha, que si hay algún conflicto de interés, aquí están los
I
míos.
continue to receive
Yo
grants
sigo
from the National
recibiendo
Institutes of
fondos
Health
del Instituto Nacional de Salud para llevar a cabo investigación académica y experta en el campo del cual he estado participando ya por más de 30
I'm also a
años.
member of the
También soy
Scientific
miembro
Advisory Committee
del Comité
of the
Asesor
leading cooking
Científico
school in the
de
United
la
States.
principal escuela de cocina en los Estados Unidos, que se llama el Instituto Culinario de América. Nos referimos el otro CIR.
I will not say any more
Yo
about
ya
that.
no voy a decir más acerca de la CIA y CIA, ustedes ya saben que este acrónimo no se refiere a la agencia de inteligencia central, sino más bien al Instituto Culinario de
My real
Norteamérica.
conflict that I have
Mi
is that I
conflicto
cook.
real de
I
verdad
have always
considero
cooked.
es que yo cocino, mi
It
cocina
is
siempre tiempo y es mi salida artística también, es la cocina donde me puedo relajar y disfrutar Entonces me encanta estar en mi casa, en mi propia cocina, donde he cocinado cenas toda la vida. Y bueno, después de la historia de estos estudiantes, él es mi hijo mayor, hoy tiene 22 años, ya me
And when you think about it, 1 or 2 generations ago, this is simply the way the world was. People cooked, they cooked together in multiple generations, thousands of years. I will add that in my own history, I have really combined my love of cooking with all of my medical education. As Dr. Lopez may have mentioned, in the late 1970s, I was sent to China as the first U.S. medical exchange student to the People's Republic of China since 1949. I was finishing Harvard Medical School, and I was given the opportunity by the United States Institute of Medicine to go study traditional Chinese medicine in Beijing. I speak Chinese with a New York accent. This is me in front of the Beijing Institute of Traditional Chinese Medicine, the Beijing Yonishien, for those of you who are fluent in Mandarin. That's the statue of Mao. And when I was there, during the day, I studied acupuncture. And these were very early years of thinking about acupuncture and whether and how it worked. I had the opportunity to participate in acupuncture anesthesia, which is fascinating, and to this day we do not understand all the physiology. I learned about massage, which I think in the West is undervalued compared to the East. I learned about herbal medicine, plant medicine, and Chinese diagnosis, very complex but used by the majority of people around the world. And most importantly for this talk, I learned about Tai Chi and mind-body connection. The connection between the mind and the body. And you know, I see Dr. Norman in the audience, and I can't help but reflect on one of his points as Jeff, I have children who multitask, listen to music, do their homework, doing Facebook, and I think it's crazy. I would argue, and I was glad to see that your point was, it's difficult to optimize one's learning skill when you're doing 3 or 4 things at once. My introduction to Tai Chi 35 years ago was really the antithesis. To learn to be present in one's body, in the moment, focusing on the breath. This was my introduction to the area of mindfulness, and my colleague Ali Haraki will be speaking about it in depth later this morning. But I'm telling you this because while I was in China, there were only 8 Western physicians in all of China, invited as academic exchange scholars. They assigned the 3 chefs to the 8 Western doctors, and every day for a year, I cooked. And I loved it. And you see, I was much thinner and healthier. I cooked and I ran and I did Tai Chi, and I learned the incredible pleasure of a plant-based, healthy, delicious, affordable, sustainable diet. The same diet that people in Asia have been eating for thousands of years. I think you could say that cooking runs in my family because this is my father at age 15 in New York. He was a baker. His father was a baker. And his father was a baker, all from Europe. So cooking is really in my genes. It runs deeply. And when I was a child, I worked alongside my father in his bakery, and I couldn't help but notice the great pleasure in giving people foods that they love, and the smiles it brought, and the absolutely essential pleasure of delicious food. Now I'm going to change gears and share with you some advice I got from the former dean of the Harvard School of Public Health, Howard Black. When I talked to him about looking at complementary medicine and lifestyle medicine 25 years ago, he gave me this advice. He said, identify experts with disciplines different from your own, with whom you do not share a common language, but with whom you share a common question. Join them to build a bridge. From this bridge, you will make your greatest professional contributions and experience some of your greatest personal satisfaction. I think this is a profound bit of advice. And you'll see how I have adopted it. Here are some of the shared questions that I have and perhaps you have. How will our grandchildren's children, talking about 25 to 50 years from now, nourish themselves and optimize their self-care? How will today's medical students, who will be practicing in the year 2050 when they are our age, guide these next generations? How should we, as today's medical educators, prepare the next generation? That's why we're here. But here are the groups of bridge builders. The most obvious, we think, are us, the medical and nutrition experts. We know the physiology, we understand the mechanisms, we know that we are deficient. But obviously we are insufficient to this global challenge. So here are our partners. The chefs, the people who cook the food who should not be held at a distance. They are really inextricably linked to the solution. People who teach and understand movement and exercise. In the United States, there's a very common expression now that sedentary lifestyle is the new tobacco. That by sitting all day, we are literally killing ourselves. We also need agricultural expertise. Given the sustainability problems, and they're really side by side, the problems with food production, water, pollution, which are poisoning China today, and which may be a threat to Mexico, one of the world's great agricultural producers, are essential to this challenge, and they are also our partners. I would argue that behavioral scientists are also key and should not be in some parallel universe. We have had 30 years of psychological and psychology research, and again, I bow to Dr. Moreland's teaching this work. How do we teach people to learn? And partly, how do we teach people to change habits? How do we optimize that change? And let's speak about that. I would also argue that mindfulness is at the absolute center of these opportunities, because if people cannot be present in their own body and in their own lives, they can't begin to decide what they will do, because they live mindlessly and they eat mindlessly. And finally, I am a pragmatist, and I would argue that economics comes science all the time. If we do not figure out how to save money or make money in a new healthcare system that addresses this problem and keeps people healthy instead of treating them when they are ill, we will all fail in our mission and we will go bankrupt internationally. This is the new team. It is not just medical experts, but if we want food and health of the future to nourish our grandchildren's grandchildren, all of these players must be on the same team. So let's do a current reality check. Where are we now? Not just in the United States, but globally. You know the famous statue of David in Italy by Michelangelo? Well, imagine David today. And 20 or 30 years ago, our televisions were large and we were skinny. Today, it's shifting. Here's an interesting observation. What's the ratio of food costs to healthcare costs? In my lifetime, the United States used to spend 3 times as much on food as it spent on healthcare when I was a child. Today, the U.S. spends twice as much on healthcare as it does on food, and I suspect this is exactly the same in Mexico. But here's an interesting fact. These are each trillions of dollars. 2 of the largest sectors in our respective economies that rarely talk to one another. Food costs have increased 17 times now. Actually, new statistics suggest food costs have gone up 19 or 20 times since I was a child. Healthcare costs have gone up almost 100 times. By the way, for those of you taking pictures, all of the things in this presentation have been submitted for publication, and I suspect or hope in the next 6 months you'll see them all. So relax. As you know, in the United States, and I'm sure in Mexico, obesity rates have gone up dramatically from 10 or 15% in the early 90s to now 36% of Americans obese and 3/4 overweight or obese. Childhood obesity has gone up at an even more staggering rate, with almost 1 in 3 children obese in dozens of U.S. states. The statistics on diabetes prevalence are absolutely shocking. The number of adults with adult-onset diabetes has quadrupled since 1980. 4-fold increase, 400%. I share with you this beautiful quote from the Lancet. The fact that type 2 diabetes, a largely preventable disorder, has reached epidemic proportions is a public health humiliation. A strong, integrated, and imaginative response is required in which the limits of drug treatment and the opportunities of civil society are recognized. What I will be talking about over the next 30 or 40 minutes are the imaginative approaches, because heaven knows we need a new set of plans. It's also remarkable that in the United States, data are convincing that the current generation of children will live shorter lives for the first time since the United States was founded. My guess is this is absolutely true in Mexico as well, and it's probably true throughout the industrialized world. All because of increasing obesity, diabetes, and our fast-paced lifestyle. This is a somewhat complicated slide, but let me explain it. It summarizes how much of the risk of developing coronary disease is attributable to 5 basic lifestyle choices. So my colleague Myers Stanford at Harvard followed 116,000 nurses over 15 years. This is one of the largest epidemiologic surveys ever mounted in the world. It's called the Nurses Study. And what he and colleagues found was, if people did not smoke, if they did not get overweight, if they exercised as little as walking a half an hour a day, and if they had a good diet, not necessarily an excellent diet, but just a reasonable diet, and if they drank 1 glass of wine or whiskey or less a day, if they did all 5 things, their risk of heart disease dropped by 82%. 82%. But the number of women who did this was only 3%. This is true in men as well. It is a staggering statistic. We know what we should do, we are not doing it. And that's bad. I don't want to make this a U.S.-centric talk, so let me share with you some statistics about Mexico and 2 other giant countries, China and India, to help you realize that everything I'm talking about is a global challenge. In Mexico, 10 years ago, about half of the men in Mexico were overweight or obese. 4 years ago, in 2010, that's gone to about 2/3 of them. For women, the numbers are even more frightening. 10 years ago, almost 2/3 of women were overweight or obese, and now it's 3/4, like the United States. The predictions, and these are all published results, are that by the year 2050, when your medical students are our age, close to 90% of Mexicans will be overweight or obese. Think about it. Unless we change, 90% of the Mexican population will be overweight or obese. This last year, Mexico overtook the United States as the fattest nation on earth. I'm not celebrating. This is a disaster. But Mexico is at the heart of the danger zone and has an opportunity to make one of the biggest changes, which is why I am so delighted to talk to you. But you are the medical educators who have the opportunity and authority to speak to your colleagues all across your medical schools and say, we have a crisis. This is a tsunami wave on the horizon. If we do not act now, we will be devastated. Another way to look at the data, in our parents' generation in Mexico, 3 or 4% of deaths were attributable to cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, only 3 or 4%. By 1990, it was 1 in 5 deaths. But here's a really frightening statistic. 10 years ago, 75% of deaths in Mexico were attributable to diet and lifestyle. Today, it's probably higher. So diet and lifestyle are the leading fundamental issues that increase the risk of death among all of your countrymen, your patients, and your families. Now, I don't want you to think Mexico and the United States are alone. The rate of change in China is absolutely the most frightening to me. I lived there. I remember how in the early 1980s, I never saw a child that was overweight, never. Statistically, fewer than 2% of all children were overweight, and I never saw an obese child in China in the 70s and 80s. But look at what happened. These statistics are 10 years old, 9 years old. 9 years ago, over the course of one generation, we went from no overweight children to 15% of boys and 9% of girls. Think about that. Here's a more frightening statistic. 10 years ago in China, in the cities with more than 1 million people, 1 in 4 boys was overweight, and 1 in 6 girls was overweight. Can you imagine? With 1.3 billion people and a rate of increase of obesity at this rate, they have the steepest rise on earth. Why? They're not riding bicycles anymore, they have cars and trains. They're eating Western food. They're eating fast food. I'll come back to that. If you look at the diabetes statistics, 15 years ago, 15% of all world diabetics on the planet were in China. I didn't know that. 4 years ago, 1/3 of all the diabetics in the world lived in China. If you now add India, which is catching up with China, half of the world's diabetics all live in India and China. It's because of the numbers of people. They each have over 1 billion people. But this is a calamity across the world. Some of it, I'm very sad and embarrassed to say, is an American U.S.-caused problem. U.S.-based companies have exported toxic food around the world. Kentucky Fried Chicken is owned by the same company that owns Taco Bell and Pizza Hut, each of which has been expanding with hundreds of new stores a day around the world. This is like cigarettes 50 years ago. These multinational companies are exporting death. It's as though for 2.5 million years, humans were doing very well and getting stronger, healthier, smarter, more sustainable. We were living longer. Think about the increase in life expectancy from 100 years ago to today. But now, everything has changed. And it's a man-made problem. This is part of why it's a problem. Some of the top nutrition and food scientists in the world have been dedicated for 50 years to create addictive food substances. You know all the companies. They make the chips. They make the texture. They look at salt and fat and sugar and satisfying crunch, and they addict us and our children. This is poison. Now I'm here to say that in the same way the medical profession 30 years ago when I was in medical school looked at all the nuclear warheads in the world and said, this is a man-made potential disaster. And the International Physicians Group for the Prevention of Nuclear War stood up and said, we will not allow governments to kill all humans with nuclear warfare. Maybe the medical establishment, beginning with medical educators, needs to stand up and say, we will not allow our companies and our governments as witnesses to allow the production of toxic food to annihilate all the population's health. Maybe we need such an international movement. So let's bring it back to this context. How are we doing as the educators? There's an interesting statistics from all the U.S. medical schools. Only 25% of U.S. medical schools, and there are about 125, teach the recommended 25 hours of nutrition. 27% of medical schools teach the recommended 25 hours. 25 hours. If you think about 25 hours in that context, the average across all medical schools is 19.6 hours over 4 years. If you think about the number of hours to train to become a practicing medical doctor, that's about 6/100ths of 1% of the education. If you add lifestyle training with exercise and mindfulness and nutrition, it's about 0.08 of 1% of all of one's training. Perhaps the more remarkable statistic is this one. If you survey medical students in the United States on the first week of their medical school education and ask them how important is nutrition with regards to your ability to be a doctor, 71% say very important. By the time they graduate, that number has decreased to less than half. We are teaching them misinformation. Let me now reflect on some of the themes we talked about yesterday. The licensing of physicians, state by state, country by country, school by school. Where might licensure play a role in the insistence that clinicians know how to advise patients about food? You would think it would be important. I'm here to share some sobering statistics here as well. The U.S. medical licensing exam does have specific questions on biochemistry, vitamins, clinical deficiencies. It does currently have case simulations that include multiple choice. But there are currently not yet standardized patients where the skill of advising the patient on how to change one's behavior are tested. To their credit, the USMLE is working on that, and I will tell you quite proudly that I've accepted an invitation to join them to build some of these licensing questions for the next generation. But right now, they do not exist as requirements. I was trained in internal medicine. The current U.S. internal medicine board of examinations does not mention nutrition in its requirements. This is more unusual. To be a licensed cardiologist in the United States, and cardiology is usually the most powerful and most financially successful department of any hospital on the medical side. To be a cardiologist, you have to do 10 cardioversions, show your skill in interpreting 150 echocardiograms, personally perform 100 cardiac catheterizations. But requirements on the board examinations in cardiology, 0. You can be a board-certified cardiologist without ever having to answer a question about nutrition, its relationship to your patient's illness, and how you're going to advise them to change. Here is my question to all of you in Mexico, responsible for the education of all healthcare professionals. Is it any different in your school than in the schools I know about in the United States? Think about it. Is this a scandal? I would say absolutely. Is it fixable? I would argue it is. Last bit of background. How are schools and hospitals doing regarding healthy food? You know where I'm going with this. This is embarrassing. The food environment in hospitals in the United States is absolutely scandalous. These photographs were taken at 3 of the most famous Harvard hospitals in the world. Children's Hospital, the Brigham Women's Hospital, Beth Israel Deacon's Hospital. This is the food in the hospital or 50 yards from the hospital. These are the foods in the #1 children's hospital in the world, Boston's Children's Hospital, which is a great hospital. But if you're serving these foods to everybody who comes to visit a sick child, what do you say about the relationship between food and health? It is ridiculous. We wouldn't have cigarettes in hospitals. Why do we have sweet cakes and pizza and full Coca-Cola? The new food labels are a bit more candy that scare you, prepare to die. I would argue that physicians can be enormously powerful as societal change agents. And the biggest success story is in smoking cessation. Most of the people here are contemporaries of mine. I would ask you, those of you who studied in the 70s or 80s, do you remember when physicians smoked? I do. Most of my professors at Harvard Medical School were chain smokers. This was in the early 1970s. They all quit. Every one of them had to quit. Why? Because the evidence was so overwhelmingly powerful and irrefutable that smoking led to heart disease and cancer. Every physician quit. There was a social stigma to being a physician who smoked, and physicians knew if they didn't quit, they would be ostracized by their peers and their patients. Smoking was then limited to designated areas in hospitals, probably in the late 70s and early 80s. Smoking was then banned entirely on all hospital campuses. Do you remember this? This is all in the last 30 years. This is not ancient history. This was a social decision. Smoking was banned in all public institutions and government settings. Smoking was then banned in all public places, including restaurants. In the United States, you can't see anybody smoking in a restaurant or a public building. Why don't we do the same thing with smoking first? Why don't we decide that we must do this? And why don't we in the medical profession make a statement? Lastly, but importantly, how about the financing of all this? Who makes the money and why? And what are the financial incentives to shift? Almost 10 years ago, the New York Times ran a very famous series of articles. They talked about the fact that the money is going in the wrong direction. This article said, you don't make money talking to diabetics about lifestyle. You make money doing surgery on obese diabetics. It said, if you're a hospital administrator and you get paid $50,000 to do bariatric surgery on a diabetic with a BMI of 37, why would you have people spend 40 minutes of their time? Surgery takes 40 minutes. Why would you have people spend 40 minutes and only make $20 teaching people to eat differently or move more? The financial incentives, and I'll come back to this, are completely misaligned. In today's medical world, hospitals, and therefore doctors and our medical students, aspire to diagnose and treat disease, and they are paid for interventions. There is no financial incentive to keep people healthy. I'll repeat that. We are paid to treat people who are diseased. There is no financial incentive to keep people healthy. This is why we have the system we have. That has to change, and I'll come back to it. So, I've listed a lot of problems. I've given you background. I've tried to make the case that this is a global challenge, not an American challenge or a U.S. challenge. Here's why we, people in this room, and our family members and our patients say they cannot change. They can't cook more, they can't move more, they can't think differently. We have no time. We don't have the cooking skills. It's too expensive. We're too out of shape. We don't have the right equipment. We don't have the right clothes. We don't have the right teachers. We can't fit in our busy schedules. We can't get our family to join us. It's our genes' fault. It's our mother's fault. It's our own fault. And we're rude. This is what people think. The most recent trend in the United States, and you tell me if this is also true in Mexico, is watch a cooking show. So a very famous writer in the United States, named Michael Pollan, talked about how food cooking shows are now these extraordinary places that gather all Americans to watch. But in the last paragraph, I quote him as he said, as a chef friend put it when I asked him if he thought I could learn anything about cooking by watching the Food Network. How much do you learn about playing basketball by watching the National Basketball Association? So as we all watch the World Cup, does that make our ability to play football any better? Of course not. It's preposterous. These are entertainment. There's a difference between watching and doing, seeing and learning. The author then asked a food consultant how things might change. And the consultant said, easy, you want Americans to eat less? I have a diet for you. It's short, it's simple, here's my diet plan. Cook it yourself. That's it. Eat anything you want, just as long as you're willing to cook it yourself. Now, I think this is an overstatement, but let's think about this. Might cooking impact the way they live? These are all the countries in Europe, plus the United States and Japan. Mexico is not on this list. This is more than 10 years old. These are each country and their rate of obesity. The two most obese on this list are the United States and Great Britain. But look at Italy and France, who, like Mexico, have wonderful food traditions. But Italy and France, there's much lower rates of obesity, interestingly. Controlling for basic demographics, my colleague David Cutler, who's an economist, said the Italian and the French adults who have lower rates of obesity spend much more time cooking every day. Interesting observation. By contrast, the United Kingdom and the United States, that have the highest rates of obesity, spend the least time cooking. We have more convenience and fast food. We eat out more. We rarely cook. It's also been observed that because of the food technologies, Americans are spending less time cooking. And over my lifetime, the amount of time cooking is going to cut in half. It's probably true in Mexico as well. There's a statistical relationship that as the amount of time cooking goes down, obesity rates go up. I would argue this is circumstantial evidence. I'm not saying this is a cause and effect, but it raises an interesting question. Should we as society think about returning to our old habits of cooking more with families? What fits your busy schedule better? Exercising an hour a day or getting 24 hours a day? Or the variation, cooking an hour a day or getting 24 hours a day? Where do we begin? Again, we have the benefit of having the medical establishment as our advertisers. Here's a question: does a physician's personal health behavior affect their patient care? How many people think this is true? That a physician's personal behavior predicts the way they will advise patients? I want to see if you follow me. Do you agree with that? It's definitely true. And there's a very big literature on this. Professor Erica Frank did a number of surveys and concluded that for medical doctors, practicing a healthy behavior itself was the most consistent and powerful predictor of physicians counseling patients about the same activities. So physicians who exercise always talk about exercise. Physicians who wear seatbelts, who don't smoke, who wear sunscreen, typically talk about this with their patients much more than physicians who do not. By extension, how you and physicians who train and lead predicts your and their willingness and ability to advise patients about how they eat. It's the same. In the United States, we have the phrase, see one, do one, eat one. Do you have the same phrase in Mexico? So let's shift that to see one, taste one, cook one, teach one. Let's think about this. 24 centuries ago, Hippocrates said, if we could give every individual the right amount of nourishment and exercise, not too little and not too much, we will have found the safest way to health. Also 24 centuries ago, the Emperor of China, who is credited with creating all of Chinese medicine, wrote these words: to administer medicines to diseases which have already developed, and thereby suppress bodily chaos which has already occurred, is comparable to the behavior of those who would begin to do the rounds after they have already gone fishing, or those who would begin to cast weapons after they have already engaged in battle. Would these things not be too late? What attracted me to China was this quote, because as a teenager, when I saw the superiority of prevention over intervention, I thought to myself, maybe I can learn something from the Chinese. If you jump ahead 24 centuries, the most respected medical experts in the United States concluded that the great advances of genetics and other biomedical discoveries could be more than offset by the burden of illness, disability, and death, caused by too many people eating too much and moving too little over their lifetime. So what have we gotten with all of our technology? An incomplete solution to enhanced health. Here's my summary of the background. Many people in our families, some of us, know exactly what choices they should make, but they feel stuck. They can't change. It's not going to change. It's just the way it is. Nutritional knowledge and information is certainly not sufficient. Here's another observation. Culinary literacy, people's ability to cook. You talk to people under 30, very few know how to cook. Why? Because both parents have been working the last 30 years. Nobody is home to teach them. It's almost a dying skill. Health professionals need comprehensive training in nutrition, but also its translation on how to talk to patients about food, food preparation, food enjoyment, cooking. Just as healthcare professionals need more information about food, the food leaders, the people who make the food, need more information about how to design healthier menus in restaurants. My observation is that no one group, the medical group, the food, culinary group, behavioral scientists, corporate, industry, environment, no one group can address all of these problems alone. This is why I want to talk to you today about a novel united front. Imagine if medical experts worked hand in hand with chefs and food experts and public health experts to say, let's rethink this. Let us collectively bring all of our strengths together to work as a united front. The inconvenient truth is, it's rare that medical, public health, and food industry experts share notes, skills, questions, and new ideas on how these communities might partner. This is why, almost 15 years ago, colleagues at Harvard and the leading cooking school in the United States, the Culinary Institute of America, and more recently, the Samuel Institute, which is an institute devoted to research and education around health and health creation. They joined together and invited guest faculty to collaborate on a very unique conference. The conference is called Healthy Kitchens, Healthy Lives. It brings together experts from the medical, public health, and food worlds. It takes place once a year in a beautiful conference center of the cooking school. This is in Napa, California. We have had about a dozen Mexican physicians come, and more of them will come next year. It's an old winery which has been restructured. We allow 430 people every year because that's how much space we have in these conference rooms and in the kitchens, and I'll come back to that. And the first thing we do is we summarize all the nutrition information. What do we know about the health benefits of plants and nuts and healthy fats? That's like any scientific conference you can go to. But here's where it changes to the experiential part. After we summarize what we know about foods we should eat more of and foods we should eat less of, the chefs come out and they demonstrate 3 delicious, healthy vegetable dishes. One from Mexico, one from Europe, one from Asia. They demonstrate 3 whole grain dishes, one from Latin America, one from Europe, one from India. They demonstrate how simple they are. And all of a sudden the audience begins to shift because they see it, they smell it, they hear the cooking. Then they taste it. Over the course of 3 days, everybody in the conference, 430 people, get a chance to taste 325 different dishes. 325 different dishes with the recipes. And they watch dozens of them being made. And they realize this is absolutely cravenly delicious food. The issue is they realize healthy food can also be delicious food, which can also be easy to make food, which can also be sustainable for the planet food. And they change. But then we invite them in the kitchen. And we say, you can do this. Again, think about learning. How do you learn? One thing is to watch, like watching a cooking channel. Another is to do the experiential piece. And we put the doctors in groups of 10 or 12, and we put 2 chefs with them. And we say, you make the pan-seared fish in the whole way. You 10 make the Mediterranean vegetables. You 10 make the Latin American vegetable and chicken dish. And they realize they can all do it. And it's delicious. And they feel a sense of accomplishment. And they can't wait to go home and show their families what they learned. Not the facts in the lecture, the skills in the kitchen. And they have changed. We also bring in children. I told you rather selfishly that my children all know how to cook, and it was a joy to cook with their family. When you see a child who has complete mastery of the kitchen, you realize it's possible that they will eat differently than children who do not know how food is made. Because they understand the ingredients, they understand what goes into it, and they understand the primitive power of making it a joyful process, a mindful process. We also talk about the health benefit of wine, and because we're in the Napa Valley and they donate thousands of bottles of wine, we have a great time, so come play. This is a short list of what we teach. How do we optimize our diet based on the current evidence? How do you perform a nutritional assessment? I never learned how to do that in medical school. And I would argue that very few medical doctors know How do you advise patients about healthy versus unhealthy carbohydrates, which are probably the single most disastrous toxic part of our entire food chain? Simple carbohydrates made from nothing more than variations of sugar and white flour. How do we talk about fats? The notion that low fat is very low is wrong. We have disproven that. How do you teach people to eat healthy fats, to enjoy avocados and guacamole, to enjoy olive oil? How do you teach doctors to tell their patients what to say, what to think about with all these diets, none of which work? Which supplements should we take, and which are a waste of money? What are the facts about the relationship between diet and cancer, diet and heart disease? But then we shift gears from food and we say, let's talk about movement and exercise. How do you take an exercise assessment and give a prescription for somebody who is sedentary and wants to change without hurting themselves? I never learned that in medical school. How do you teach people, clinicians, about being mindful, about being present in life and with their food? Because this essential skill is probably the most important if we're going to have people eat differently and live differently. And again, most physicians and medical students have only limited exposure to this. And lastly, we bring in psychologists and health coaches to say, how do you help somebody change who would like to change or feels stuck? This is what goes on in the kitchens, in groups of 10 or 12. Physicians learn to cook with healthy fats and oils, whole grains, vegetables, making healthy desserts where it's mainly fruit and a little bit of cake or chocolate. Healthier proteins, wonderful breakfasts that are healthier, cooking with spices and less salt. We talk about wine, and the fact is, for men drinking 1 or 2 glasses of wine or beer or liquor, and for women drinking 1 glass of alcohol a day actually reduces their rate of cardiovascular disease. More than that can be dangerous, but 1 to 2 drinks a day is actually helpful. And a lot of our time is spent on eating well with less money. It is a myth, an urban legend, a myth that you have to be rich to eat healthy, delicious food. And we prove that. We showcase all of the healthy menus we can create, feeding a family of 6 for $20. I don't need to explain that to a Mexican community. You know that healthy, predominantly plant-based, wonderful food can be obtained with rice and grains and quinoa for less than $20 a family. In America, people don't understand this. How do we get doctors to remind patients they must move in this direction? Instead of this, which is the standard American diet, we say SAD, SAD. It's usually a big chunk of meat, animal protein, with an unhealthy carbohydrate, and a vegetable that nobody wants to eat. This is in every restaurant throughout the industrialized world. We showcase vegetables and beans and nuts. We showcase fortified grains. There are now ways to make pasta that have a lot more protein and fiber, not just simple carbohydrate. And we add to it healthy protein and vegetables. Mexico has blessed the world with the tradition of beans. In North America and in the United States, very few Americans and U.S. citizens eat beans. We teach them. You know this. We show how a meal that has a little bit of protein and a lot of vegetables and maybe a little bit of cheese can be spectacular. Why do you need to eat the other thing when you can eat this? And we show the doctors they can make this in 5 minutes. Simple barbecue foods. We also review the literature on diets. And in the United States, we have spent probably $100 million looking at diets. Here's my summary of all the $100 million of federal funds. The bottom line is there's no pattern that favors any diet. None is better than any other. The effectiveness of all the diets is limited, and usually within a year or 2 years, 3/4 to 80% of gain weight is done. Maybe diets are not the solution. Maybe humans were never created to live in a perpetual state of constraint. So this is where I give you a new idea.
Sí,
The idea
está
of
todo.
teaching kitchen. A place where individuals can learn nutrition facts, basic shopping and cooking skills, personalized instruction, exercise, and movement. Imagine it's in a kitchen. Imagine it has physicians. Imagine if we also teach the medical students mindfulness and a place to replace the suboptimal habits with healthier habits. A place to help patients and medical trainees learn the skills alongside
Los que se han descompuesto, los
if
han
you're going to
matado,
teach it, you have to
se
do
han
it.
descompuesto nada más, pues.
Imagine teaching kitchen in your medical school. This is what the curriculum would look like. Nutrition facts, shopping, cooking, preparing a range of delicious foods, making it convenient, teaching eating out 101, so people won't sabotage themselves by having butter and bread before they have the entree. Skills to incorporate mindfulness. What if we taught this? What if we showed that it can be quick, affordable, fun, and delicious? Here's the proposition. Maybe teaching kitchen should be established in all medical schools and allied health schools. Here's the research proposition. That our patients with elevated risk of cardiovascular disease, if randomized to usual care or usual care plus several months of education in this teaching kitchen environment, that those patients will change, not for 6 months, but many of them might change forever and improve their clinical outcomes, their behaviors, reduce their costs, their quality of life. And from a scientific vantage point, we just have to show that this approach, teaching skills for life, is superior to teaching a diet. Weight Watchers is the #1 diet on the planet. It's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I think this would be better than Weight Watchers. And I think medical schools should plan for this. So what if hospitals and ambulatory care centers began to test this hypothesis by promoting teaching healthy cooking and food preparation in addition to high-tech biomedicine? This is not either or. This is not a zero-sum proposition. No. Shouldn't medical settings be the ultimate showrooms for healthy, delicious food, along with high-tech infrastructure? Why can't hospitals and healthcare delivery systems showcase the best cafeterias, the best restaurants, the best room service? I think they can. And I don't think it takes away from their emergency rooms or the technologies or their MRI scanners. This is a prototype hospital I want you to look at. It's in Michigan, very cold. It's part of the Henry Ford Health System, same family that built Ford motor cars. It's about 5 years old. The first thing you see as you walk into this hospital, which was designed and led by a former vice president of the Ritz-Carlton company. This hospital begins with a cafe space of gourmet food outside with flowers. When you walk in, you are met by people who show you exactly where you need to go and take you like you're in a spa at a great hotel. The very first room at the entrance of the hospital is a teaching kitchen. This is the first space you see. A kitchen area that sits 92 people, where nutritionists and chefs demonstrate healthy, delicious food to the community. you walk further up the hall, this is the cafeteria. The chefs there are fabulous chefs that went to great cooking schools. Some of them worked at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. The food is magnificent. People come from all over the city just to go to the cafeteria for lunch. But then this CEO was even more creative. He said, we need a greenhouse on the grounds of the hospital. We need to showcase the community and its children where the food comes from, how it's grown. This is actually a hydroponic greenhouse that's certified as organic, that grows 15% of all of the salad stuff and all of the herbs all year, even in the winter in Michigan. But here's the creative genius behind these numbers. The CEO, who was a hotel manager, not a physician, was criticized when he started this because he said he would make us go bankrupt. We have to pay for chefs to give room service to our patients. It's going to cost $50, $60 a meal. He said we have to serve healthy, delicious food to our patients. He made the decision, but this is what happened. All the family members that came to visit their family, their loved ones, they all ordered off the same menu. His restaurant, in the rooms of the patients, made a lot of money. Same thing with the greenhouse. He said we must do this to teach the children. Hundreds of school systems send their children on buses to learn about food and food production, and they pay every time they buy. The greenhouse makes money. The service and the food are so spectacular that they are a meeting place for the community, a destination, and they stole a lot of patients from their competitive hospitals. Here's an amazing observation. At this conference that I've directed now for 10 years, we asked everybody this last March, how many of you in your hospitals have a demonstration kitchen today or will have one built within 24 months? 129 out of 430 doctors and nurses said in our hospital we have a kitchen, or we will have a kitchen. This is already happening. I urge you in Mexico to be leaders in this field. You have such a fabulous food tradition. How could you not be with people in the United States showing that this is part of the future of medical education and healthcare delivery? Don't let people think that Mexican food is the Americanized version of Mexican food. Show them the great tradition of healthy, sustainable, delicious food, and teach it to your medical staff. The mindfulness piece cannot be underestimated. If people are not present when they eat, if they don't realize when they're hungry, if they don't realize that the banquet is in the first bite, and after that, if they're watching football, if they're reading the paper, if they're talking but they're not present, they will eat too much. Teaching medical professionals about mindfulness is essential. The practice of mindfulness is about being receptive, open, and accepting things as they are. It takes practice. It is difficult, but incredibly enjoyable and easy to teach and learn over several years. But let's shift for a second about behavior and another part of medical education. And again, I'm reflecting on what Jeff taught us yesterday. Mark Twain said, habit is habit not to be thrown out of the window, coaxed down the stairs one step at a time. And here I introduce to you another ally for the next generation of health professionals, the health coach. These tend to be doctors, nurses, and allied health professionals who have been retrained in psychology. In the medical school expertise training, we train doctors and other professionals to diagnose the problem, you have too much weight, your lipids are up, your blood pressure is up, you have a problem. And then we advise, we say you should eat less, you should exercise more, you should stop eating fast food. It doesn't work. That's the medical model, the expert model. We focus on the problem, we direct people, they do nothing. We must stop. The health coaching model is a completely different strategy. It asks the patient to describe themselves at the healthiest state of their entire life. How old are they? What do they look like? What were they eating? What exercise are they doing? What made it so pleasurable? And then it says, what do you miss about it? What do you want to regain? And then the hardest part of the training is to ask the patient why they want to change. Because if you don't understand the why, you'll never get to the how. This takes psychological counseling. This is pulling, not pushing. This is an art that can be taught. How do you help people decide why they want to change so you can help them step by step how to change? It relies on the patient to sit with their ambivalence and create a plan. It stays with the patient over weeks or months to show them that they can succeed. It is a collaborative venture. It is not one that points a finger and says, you must change. It's one that says, let me help you decide to change. And then we'll figure it out. New model. They will have to be shoulder to shoulder with all the medical professionals. I want to get to the last section, so let me jump through this. The last point I want to make is technology is our friend. Our children are all wired. Everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has a wearable device. We now know that wearing devices helps people lose weight. We know that health coaching helps people lose weight. The combination of wearable devices and health coaching is probably essential to medical education in the future. And soon we will have devices that we swallow that measure things about our metabolic rate and our calorie consumption. We will have tattoos that tell us our blood pressure and our blood sugar. Google has just applied for a patent for a contact lens that will measure all of our physiology and blood sugar and blood pressure continuously. This is not the future, this is now. And we must prepare for wearable devices. So what's the evidence that this changes anything? That teaching people to do these things evokes change. We asked physicians who attended our conference, at baseline, how often did you prepare your food? How aware were you of calories? How aware are you of whole grains and how often do you eat healthy foods or advise patients? And then we asked doctors who attended our conference 3 months later the same question. And they shifted in a positive direction. They changed what they ate. They were more confident advising their patients. I'm going to skip this. Maybe I won't. This is an article in the New England Journal that looked at 415 obese patients in Baltimore. It gave them a health coach. One group got a health coach in person, one group got it by phone and email, and the other group just got usual care. The two groups that got health coaching lost weight and kept it off over 2 years. What did they teach these people? They taught them nutrition facts. They taught them to exercise and move more. They taught them about portion control, stress management, mindfulness, how to eat well on a budget, how to eat better breakfasts. What if all of those things were in your medical curriculum? We know that diet can reduce heart disease and heart attacks by 33%. This was a study in Spain following thousands of people, half of them by the Mediterranean diet, and reduced their heart attack rates. So let's envision the future. Where are we going? You know, having the gene doesn't mean you're going to have the disease. By way of example, if somebody in your family gets diabetes, it increases your rate to 30%. If an identical twin gets it, your increased risk is 80% but not 100%, because it matters what we choose to do in lifestyle and diet and exercise on a given month. So to what extent can choices of lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, stress management reduce the risk of developing disease in those who have the gene? In my view, medicine of the next century will be a combination of diet, mental reflection, physical activity, along with high-tech science. The term clinical epigenetics is now becoming popular. How do we teach this to the next generation? I introduce you to a new term, salutogenesis, the opposite of pathogenesis. Most of medicine is focused on pathogenesis, from disease to death. What if we spent as much time and energy training the next generation to look at health creation, and health promotion, salutogenesis? In the future, we will know more about genetic risk for every individual from the time of birth. We will still rely on basic science to create new discoveries. We will have hospitals that are generally for short-term admission and interventions. Most of medical care will remain in outpatient centers as it is today. This is the current picture. But what if 25 and 50 years from now, there were exercise therapy centers as part of the medical system, the health system, not the disease system? What if there were also new food industry and restaurants and teaching coaches as part of the health delivery model paid for by insurance? So that people with the genes that say they're going to get heart disease learn to cook and move differently. What if there were also mindfulness centers and health coaching centers? Right now, this is impossible. Unless you are very rich, very wise, and very well connected. But if we dream it, we can build it. So what can we do? Let's require courses in nutrition, lifestyle, and self-care. Let's include relevant information on board examinations in every country. That will shift everything. And that's why I'm so pleased to join the U.S. Medical Licensing Examination Board. Let's incorporate web-based data, these new devices, into our medical tracking. It's going to be in our medical record. Let's get ahead of the problem before our students bring it to us. Let's build teaching kitchens in hospitals. We have labs for biology, chemistry, and anatomy. We need teaching kitchens as places to learn the translation of nutritional science. It's already happening in dozens of medical schools. We talked a lot about standardized patient examination. We now test people about their ability to react to somebody with a chest pain. Why don't we examine people on their ability to face the patient who says, I gained weight, my blood pressure is up, my cholesterol is up, my sugar is up. Can you help me change? Can you refer me to a group of experts to help me change? If we do not train the next generation to address this issue, then apropos of Dr. Hardin's point, we will not have fundamentally shifted the entire proposition of what it means to educate a clinician for the next century. So imagine if they have the best restaurants and cafeterias in our hospitals, not the worst. Hospital food should set an example. We should set an example. As we, the healthcare professionals, do with smoking, we should by example. And finally, there's the financial driver. As every country faces this global challenge of economic crisis, and we move from a fee-for-service to a capitated plan, we may, for the first time in human history, align financial incentives with medical necessities. We may have a demand for disease prevention and health promotion, keeping people out of the hospital, salutogenesis, as a counterweight to disease diagnosis and treatment. Once the financial incentives are shifted and the board's examinations make a requirement, the entire system of medical education will shift. So that our students today are practicing a different environment in the year 2050. The Minister of Finance at Davos 2 years ago said we must get the narrative right, that health equals wealth, that prevention of chronic illness and promotion of healthy living is an economic advantage. One leader suggested merging the two words to wealth. So, we can and we must teach it, we have to model it, we have to test it and refine it, we have to make nutrition, self-care, and lifestyle a priority on par with high-tech medicine. We have to change the culture of medical education to better address the challenges of our time, including the way we, as a species, eat and move and think in our high-tech, overstimulated global village. This is not just a U.S. problem, it's a world problem. Let me remind you, cardiovascular disease is the #1 cause of death now, not infectious disease. I didn't tell you a family secret. Very sadly, my own father died of a heart attack at age 39 because he ate the wrong food and got lousy genes. We can do better for the next generation. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control has said that right now 1 in 3 Americans will be diabetic. What do we do? And I close with this quote from Albert Einstein that said, no problem can be solved from the same kernel of consciousness that created it. We must learn to see the world anew. I thank you very much for your attention.
Tenemos tiempo para una intervención, si me pasan el libro.
En primer lugar, quiero felicitarle por su brillante conferencia. Quiero decirle que comparto sus pasiones por la nutrición médica y por la educación médica. Yo me dedico a ambos campos, coordino el área de nutrición médica en la Universidad de Guadalajara. quisiera complementar, más que entrar en contradicción, complementar algunas cosas
Antes de que empiece la
para la
práctica,
comunidad
se escucha
mexicana,
este video.
que podría ser algo importante.
Es el video, ¿verdad? Es el video, ¿verdad?
Es que en México hay 50 millones que tienen pobreza alimentaria y que no, el problema no es aprender a comer, sino aprender a producir sus alimentos. Entonces nosotros en las universidades, además de enseñarles a cocinar alimentos a nutriólogos y a médicos, y les enseñamos a cómo producir alimentos, para que le enseñen a las poblaciones a producir alimentos, precisamente porque el problema es de pobreza alimentaria, más que de tener alimentos. Entonces les enseñamos a producir. La segunda cuestión es que el problema que tenemos en México tiene otras implicaciones genéticas también. Es decir, hay estudios que indican que el 80% de la población mexicana tenemos un gen ahorrador producto de las migraciones continuadas que se dieron hace unos 40.000 años y que la población ha generado ese gen como un problema. Y eso ha sido demostrado por estudios hechos en la Universidad Nacional de México, la UNAM. Y por eso es que eso se ha agregado con los problemas de la conquista posterior de España. Tenemos 15 millones de indígenas excluidos de toda posibilidad de comer, que viven en la Sierra Madre Occidental de este país. Entonces tenemos un problema de que la mayoría de la población tiene, más el gen ahorrador, problemas de producción de alimentos. Entonces nosotros les enseñamos también a producirlos y a comerlos como una cuestión. Pero hay algo más importante que creo yo, es el pueblo mexicano come tortilla, somos comedores de tortilla, pero hemos abandonado la forma en cómo originariamente se producía la tortilla, que es lo que se llama la nixtamalización. Y la industria alimentaria de tortilla lo que ha hecho es transformar la tortilla en un alimento chatarra, igual que los otros alimentos, porque le sacan el aceite vegetal y le quitan la fibra vegetal, y lo que realmente comemos como tortilla es otro alimento chatarra como todos. Si ese es uno de los problemas, entonces resulta que hay que regular la industria alimentaria también. Pero si nosotros tenemos estudios también de la propaganda comercial por televisión, exactamente la semana pasada tuvimos un estudio de 4 canales de televisión en México, que es lo que los analizamos por una semana con un grupo de alumnos de nutrición.
May I pause for a moment?
¿Sí?
I love these questions. And I am going to be on a panel with Dr. Haramati for 45 minutes.
Sí.
Let me answer some of these then, because I don't want to take time from the next speaker. But just so you understand, food insecurity, genetic predisposition are exactly the kind of examples that we have to build into medical education. I'm agreeing with you. And the chef in me, the person that understands food production, wants to talk to you about healthy Mexican food that is the way you used to make it versus modern, high-tech, processed Mexican food, which is a disaster. So we will talk about that later. Okay?
Sí.
Dr. David Eisenberg, this is a big challenge because we have an extremely big problem with overweight and obesity. But also now we have your comment, your advice, and your ideas. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for the honor to be our speaker. present you the certificate of participation. Thank you very much.
Puede ser la tuya, ¿no? Si la abrió, puede ser la tuya, ¿no?
Sí. Está.
En su momento nada de eso, ¿no?
Sí, sí, sí.
Los diplomas de esta vez. El futuro de la decía, ¿no?
Is the slide quick enough there?
Yes.
La escuela de esquina
Next.
Ah, yes, yes, it's good.
And when I stand up, put on the first slide.
Yes.
As soon as I stand up.
¿Quiénes son los